Miss Liz, tea time, yeah, making a difference, one cup at a time, tea time, yeah, Miss Liz, tea time, yeah, making a difference, one cup at a time, tea time, yeah. So be sure to grab your tea, grab a seat, and tune in to Miss Liz, tea time. Making a difference, one cup at a time. Tea time, yeah. Tea time, time.
Well, good morning and welcome to Tea Time. Miss Liz is back with another bright show. And this morning I have an incredible guest. We've been in the back just giggling away, laughing and talking about family history and all of that good stuff. So guess what? That's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about ancestors and we're going to talk about American history and we're going to talk about the incredible Nancy Ward. That's right. Debra Yates' seventh great grandmother was connected to George Washington and Daniel Boone and all of those good famous names that we all know about that we all were taught in school. So we're going to talk about those guys this morning. So before we get started, we're going to do the disclaimer and all of that good stuff, and we're going to get that in. But before we get started, I want everyone to grab your tea, grab your coffee, grab your juice, and get your breakfast because breakfast is really deeply important. Without breakfast, we don't keep moving. So get that breakfast in there. So before we get started, let's get going. And we're going to just slap that on there. Disclaimer for Miss Liz's Tea Time live show. Miss Liz, myself, is going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment, please grant StreamYard permission to see your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that the content brought forward for any Tea Time show hosted by myself, Miss Liz, is always brought forward in good faith. However, may bring forward dialogues and opinions that are not representative of my platform. The facts and information are perceived to be accurate at the giving time of airing. All Tea Time guests and audience participants are responsible for using their good judgment in taking any action that may relate to the discussion. The content brought forward may include discussions for some where they may be emotionally at risk. It is significant to know that this show is engaging in discussion forums only to offer and inspire awareness and connection and is not providing therapeutical advice. If you have any questions about the disclaimer or the panelist discussion, you may freely contact me, Miss Liz, through my email at bookingmissliz@gmail.com. Moving forward, should you choose to voluntarily participate in today's show in any aspect, I myself, Miss Liz, welcomes you. And should you decide that the show is not made for you at this time, I respect your wishes and will see you at a later show at a later date and time. And again, all tea times this year are done on Thursday, 10, 3, and 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Unless it's a rescheduled show, then it is on Monday or Tuesday. So keep your eyes open for that. Now, a little bit on Debra Yates. Debra Yates hails from Ohio, but now resides in Southwest Florida. Although she began her writing later in life, she did so with her great passion. Being of a Cherokee descent and having had stories passed down from generation to generation, Debra found herself drawn to family history to the point of enlisting a genealogist to verify her conclusions. Traveling to relevant destinations along East Coast and in the Midwest, she brought her findings back to the peace, calm, and tranquility that she feels God has provided to her in the Sunshine State. With the release of Women of Many Names, she now puts her sights on follow-up to document the next stages of her seventh great grandmother's historic life. Her book, Woman of Many Names, is about her seventh great grandmother, Nancy Ward, who was an important woman in Native American history. Nancy Ward, also known as Nanny He, I hope I'm saying it right, had tried had ties to Daniel Boone and George Washington, including having saved the later life, and is believed vice versa. Letters from Ward to Washington were later found in Thomas Jefferson's effects. So we're going to be talking about all these crazy guys because these guys they were all over, and Nancy Ward has an incredible story. So let's get it right from her great granddaughter. So let me bring in Deborah. Welcome, Deborah.
Good morning, Liz. How are you this morning?
I am good. It is nice to see us on the screen again, right? We were having so much fun in the background. So I want to get into the book and that and why the names and all of that good stuff. But I want to start off with, who is Debra Yates?
Debra Yates was just a simple woman living a simple life in Ohio. And I don't really know how simple it was, but I was a landscape design artist for about 25 years. I was the first woman in Ohio to be a sole proprietor of a landscape company. And I went around trying to make Ohio prettier. And I think I succeeded.
Wow, look at you.
Yeah.
You were planting seeds and fixing it up and making it pretty even before you started this.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I started young. I think I was probably 16 years old when I burned my first bras. Trying to, women's rights and all, I was all about that as a young person. And I thought that, we should all be making the same amount of money and that women could do anything that they wanted to do. We could do it as good as men. I went to work for my dad's construction company, Mid Ohio Pipeline. Basically, at a pretty young age, I went on the road with them at 19 and drove dump trucks and backhoes, and I had my own jackhammer, and it was amazing. It was revolutionary at the time. There were not very many women construction workers back in 1977, that's for sure. So.
Wow. And I love that you burned your bra. That was a part of history too.
Indeed. Indeed.
And we have to speak up and we have to be that difference, right? And I think this is where you get it from. Is you get it from your great grandma, like we were saying in the back, right? Like, where do we get this attitude from? Where do we get this hardness and this toughness and this warrior effect, right? It comes from ancestors.
Yes.
So I want to get into, how did you start with this?
Well, I really just started, just writing down the stories that my grandfather had told me as a young person. I was really the only grandchild he had that seemed overly interested in our Native Americanness and the Cherokee culture and so on and so forth. So he actually gave me, whenever I speak for Nancy Ward, I wear an arrowhead that belonged to my grandmother. And I had mounted on this necklace when I think I was about 18 years old. And then I also have a ring that I wear that was her stone, and then my grandfather, it was broken, so he had it melted down, the copper that came with the ring, into this mounting, and had that made for me. So it's very special. Both pieces are very special to me, and I feel even more linked to her when I wear them. So whenever I speak on behalf of Nancy Ward, you will see that I wear those two pieces. And I believe that DNA goes to our very core. It is our core. It is who we are. And I believe it's important to understand, know as much as you can about your ancestors, because they were important, because without them, there would be no us. And, honor them in the way that they should be. Nanyehi was a very special woman to our family, to the Cherokee in the 1700s. And I believe, we're talking about today, it seems like she's, gained relevance with the publication of my book. My cousin Becky Hobbs has written a beautiful music called Nanyi, and it is performed pretty much every year somewhere in the United States. So I'm very proud of her. We started our projects within about 6 months of each other. Becky and I never knew each other until, she was ready to come forth with her musical, and probably about a year before my book published. So the similarities between our projects is almost uncanny, almost uncanny. And it was like we both, started kind of vibrating at the same time to do this work. It has to be a God thing, a Nanyi thing. My grandfather, his name was Kingfisher, which was Nancy Ward's first husband. Her second husband was Bryant Ward, which she also had a child with him at when they were married, and he was in Cherokee country. So DNA is important. Your heritage is important, no matter who it is, and no matter who you're related to.
So how long did it take you to find out all this information?
Oh, decades, actually.
Oh,
I can remember my grandfather started telling me the stories as soon as I understood that I was Cherokee Indian, or was told that I was Cherokee, because we were raised not knowing. I found out somewhere between 12 and 13 years of age, and I kept having a reoccurring dream about a Native American woman standing on a hill looking down into a valley with a river, and with Native Americans running around. And this third time I had the dream, I had told my mom several times, I keep having this dream. I keep having this dream. The third time I told her that I keep having this dream, she goes, all right, doggone it. You're Cherokee Indian, but don't you tell a soul. And I went, oh, that explains the dreams. And so anyways, I had always been collecting swans and owls and wolf things, and just feathers just meant everything to me. That simple things in life meant so much to me, and I didn't understand why I was so drawn to things of that nature, and nature and animals. I love animals, and animals seem to love me. So I, ended up working with horses and dogs, and training parrots, and taming whatever I could get my hands on. And it just was second nature to me, and I didn't understand. But once I understood that I was Native American, it all started to make sense to me. And I wanted to know everything I could. I was like a sponge. And every time I'd see my grandpa, I'd go, oh, tell me stories, tell me stories. And I would sit around and listen to him talk about things that his mother had told him as a little boy, and his sisters. He was about the last of 12 children. So he had a lot of older siblings, that like to recant the stories, because that's how we told our stories, was through the oral tradition, not necessarily the written word. And he would tell me about George Washington, and Thomas Jefferson and Daniel Boone. And it's like, oh, my family lived this life.
it's really cool, right, Deborah? Like when you hear those names, because they're taught in school, and then you're like, but my family really knew these people. Like
Daniel Boone, I was in love with the show Daniel Boone. Was a man, big man. I loved that show. It was my favorite show. And to know that my grandmother knew these people, parlayed and talked to these people, and formed treaties with these people.
Amazing, right?
My soul just soared. I just was so excited about the whole thing. And so I just locked those stories away in here and in my heart. And I as I started to age, I kept thinking, oh, if I don't write these stories down, they're going to go with me. They could go with me. Because I didn't really understand the concept that my grandma was famous and was in, books and so on and so forth, and memoirs, and had wrote letters to presidents, and hung out with presidents, future presidents. And, Thomas Jefferson was so integral to the Revolutionary War, even as a younger man. He was a little bit younger, but he was very important in the things that were going on. Nancy was negotiating treaties that opened up territories in the upper Northeast that allowed, let's say, George Washington to traverse through. And had those treaties not been in place, we could have lost a young George Washington to an arrow. It
Yeah.
could have happened. But I think that, God has a plan for everybody. And Nancy had an integral part to play in the forming of this country, and pulling away from Europe. Now people say, well, you know, they did this and they did that. And I said, well, hey, let me tell you, if there was a contingent of soldiers, be they French, Spanish, English, colonials, standing at your front door with guns pointed at you, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
If you know you are outnumbered, out, you know, weaponized, what are you going to do? You're going to go along with yeah, that sounds good to me. Yeah, sure, we're on your side. Being on our own sides all along. I mean, they knew that. They weren't ignorant, negotiators as well. They know as soon as they turned their back, Nancy Ward and Oconestoga and Attaculla were going to do something else, part of which why, they tried to assassinate and or kill my family many times. A young dragging canoe, people say, well, Nancy was, possibly a traitor to her people because she would warn settlers that there was a war party coming. Her son was in those war parties as well.
Wow.
And I have to believe that it was all part of not only a divine plan, but a plan that had been basically put together by my ancestors as well. And or they would have killed her. They would have ended Nancy Ward's life if they truly thought she was a traitor. She was more about peace after the Battle of what I will call Taliwa, which happened in Ball Ground, Georgia, and she was actually 3 to 4 months pregnant when she went to war with her husband. And they were in a fight with the Creek Indians, and they were infringing upon their hunting grounds. And back in those times, your hunting grounds were everything.
Yeah.
They were your life source, your food source. Water was completely important as well. But if you take away the food, you take away water, you last for 3 days. You take away water, food, you last for 20 to 25. So those things were always very important. And truly, we call ourselves Anayuia, which means people of the water, or water people. And we didn't call ourselves Cherokee Indians. Actually, if research does me correctly, the word Cherokee truly meant enemy in Greek. So, yeah, a little tidbit there. You know, everything has a season and everything has a reason. And it's important to try to understand what those are. Just like everything we've been through in the last few years is as a world. And what I'm talking about, I would assume. And, we've been through things that we thought we would never go through.
Yep.
Now, my grandparents went through the Spanish flu back in the, 1922, 23, whatever that era was.
I think it came out before the war, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And one of my grandparents died from that. My grandfather, Cherokee grandfather's mother, passed away during that era, along with several of her children. So, you have to kind of understand that it was probably the Spanish flu that actually really took them. And, we need to understand history. It is what it is. And we need to try to patch our families back up as best we can. Forgive everybody for having a different opinion, because we were born free. We're allowed to have a different opinion and should not be punished for that difference of opinion.
right? We should have that freedom of saying, you know what, that doesn't add up for me, but it might be add up for you. That's your cup of tea, but not my cup of tea, you know? And
Yes.
we should have that right to say that without
Yeah.
being punished, like you said. Uh, so, Deborah, I want to ask you, did you find further past Nancy Ward in your family, or is that as far as you got?
Oh no. There I have a Jacobite grandparent that
Hmm.
fought in the Jacobite wars in Scotland, and he got booted out of Scotland and ended up in America. And his name was Ludwig Grant. I have a grandparents that started the Valley Forge, which was made a lot of the weaponry for the Revolutionary War. One of my grandfathers died with Lewis and Clark on that trail across the United States. And I actually, well, my mother might not be happy with me, but I had a grandmother that was murdered in the Salem witch hunt, and was later proven to not be a witch. And I had relatives that came on the Mayflower. Um,
It's amazing, right? When you start digging in the past, like you find out and you're like, oh, that's cool. And that's where I get that from. And where's this leaf going to take me and that leaf? And anybody who does ancestry out there and the listeners, the leaves are what ancestry does. It's the leaf on the trees, right? So then you find out if you're related. And sometimes the leaves that connect with you are not related, but you find a different direction and you find another clue because they might have a clue that they thought was related to you and it
yeah,
was related to them, or you have a leaf and then it just connects.
yeah.
And I think it's really incredible. So I want to get into the name of the book. Why did you name it Women of Many Names?
Well, that was quite an interesting day in itself. As I began researching the white man world, so to speak, computer and stuff, I started finding all these different names that Nancy was called during her
Oh,
life. And I'm listing them out and I'm listing them out. And I'm like, this woman had so many names. I can't believe my grandmother had this many names. She was just a woman that had so many names. I don't understand. And I went, oh, bingo.
there's
There's the name of the book. It's just, I think once you open up that that can of worms, so to speak, or you open the doors to the possibility of what can be, I believe that the creator sends things and starts lining things up so that that makes sense. And as I started doing more and more research, because I wrote down my words of the stories my grandpa had given me, I shipped it all to my girlfriend because I wasn't computer savvy. And I knew that it had to be done a certain way. And I just wasn't into computers and all that stuff. So I sent it to my girlfriend, and she, transposed everything onto a disc for me. And when she sent it back, she called me and she says, I put that in the mail today. She says, I made a copy of it just in case it gets lost because, Deborah, this is a story that needs to be told. This is history. And these things need to be known by other people than just you and your family. So I had to consider it very, very much so because I respected my friend Sandy. And she'd always wanted to write a book ever since we were little girls. I'm going to write a book someday. I'm going to write a book someday. And I kept going, okay. And I'm waiting for it. I'm excited for you that you want to do this. And when she told me I needed to write a book and that I already had the start of one, I went, okay. So I started, at that point, I started researching and trying to find out everything that I could about her. And that's how that happened.
So how long did it take you to write the book?
About 4 years, I would say.
Ooh.
4 years.
I like that it took you a couple of years, especially when it comes to so much incredible history, right? But now that book is out there, so that story is staying out there now for life.
Yes,
But
it's been out a while, and I think it published in, I want to say 2017. And that anybody still wants to talk to me about this book just amazes me and gives me such great pride. There is my grandmother actually has a park and a boat ramp that were named in her honor. And one of my cousins called me. I was on a trip through the South, and she goes, "Can you go to Benton, Tennessee?" And I said, "Well, I'm in Chattanooga. I'm not in Chattanooga." I said, "I'm in Charleston." Okay. I said, "Tennessee is like the roundabout way." And so I thought about it overnight, and I I had some sort of epiphany or a dream, and that told me that the old one was more important now. And I woke up and I'm going, wow, what a dream that was. So I called my cousin and I said, I will go. I will go see what this is all about. And we had no idea that our grandmother was buried there.
oh,
It was her gravesite.
oh, wow.
Oh, I'm telling you, when I pulled in there, my body went insane. I raised the goosebumps all over. My heart started palpitating, and I felt like I was walking 3 feet off the ground. To think that my grandmother was buried on top of that hill, and I had no idea. I don't even know if my grandpa knew she was buried up there. He must not have, because he never told me. And because it was, he was raised in Oklahoma, and, we were supposed to forget our heritage. And he was taught not to, think about his heritage and to deny his heritage and who he was. So, parts of the story get, kind of shuffled around and lost, for better word to use, maybe. I'm not sure. So as I started descending that hill, I'm looking around and I'm going, oh my gosh, my life makes sense. The things that I have loved all these years. And I got to the top of that hill and I turned and I looked down into that valley, and it literally took me to my knees. Remember that dream I told you about when I was
Yeah.
12? It was there.
You just gave me goosebumps. I don't know
It
why
was
I'm getting
that.
goosebumps. It
So
is amazing when you find your history, right? And it makes sense. Things start to connect the dots, and then you're like, that's why I like that. Why doesn't my brother and sister not like that? Like, why, you know? And it's not because they didn't have the same grandmother. It's just you had a closer connection to her than the
it's
other
that
ones did.
that strand of DNA. It is so deep. I believe that our bodies and our minds somehow or another have some sort of connection, recollection to the strand of DNA. For some people, maybe it's not that way for everybody. But like I said, I believe the creator put me right where I was at to write this story. It's in the Library of Congress. As long as the Library of Congress exists, that story's there and can be told for another 200 years.
Yeah.
My grandmother's been dead for 200 years, and her story is as relevant today as it was then. And maybe even more so, because we need heroes today.
Yes.
We need heroes that actually existed, that weren't a figment of somebody's imagination, and that young women can look up to. She was a Cherokee leader in the 17 and 1800s, when women leaders were just about unheard of, unless your name was Queen Elizabeth or Mary Queen of Scots. We are worthwhile. We have
Yep.
good minds. We can be good leaders, negotiators, and always could have been, had we not been derailed, so to speak.
Yeah.
And to know that my grandmother was one of those people, just swells me with the greatest pride. That I can't even hardly sometimes imagine that this this was my family, and
Right.
I'm
And when you find that history, like grave sites, we need to start talking more about grave sites. People are put in a grave so that we can remember them, so we can honor them. When we go to a gravesite, we're not dancing, we're not partying on their site. We're actually giving them respect by honoring those people. That's
Yeah.
what gravesites are for.
Oh,
They lived a life too, and let's remember their lives. Like, we need to have that discussion on gravesites, because
well,
when you start talking about going to your great grandmother's gravesite, literally was getting goosebumps, Deborah. And I was like, why am I getting goosebumps? She ain't my grandma, but I
pretty
love
amazing.
ancestors. Like, I know that that's where I get my stubbornness from. That's where I get my hardness from, because they had it hard, but they continued on. And Nancy Ward, from the information that I got and the research that I got, was this woman was a strong woman. She was not one to play with. Like, and a lot of her people said that she was a traitor and that, but she wasn't. She was the leader, stating, let's join, let's connect, let's
Don't
unionize.
succeed
Like,
your lands. Don't succeed your lands. That was so important to her statement that she made continually.
yeah,
Granted, she did sell Kentucky, okay. But she also knew they couldn't hold Kentucky. It was too far away. It was our hunting grounds. We would go up there as a people and hunt and bring the game back, and to reserve. It was all about ecology. Even then, they were not stupid people. They knew they needed to save the resources around home for when it got cold and you weren't moving around, because you knew you couldn't go to Kentucky in the winter. It was too wet and snowy, whatever. So there was even a trader route, not TRADER, that went from one end of the United States to the other and into Canada as well, because we
yep,
were just one people. Like I told you earlier, we
yep,
didn't recognize a border of Canada and the United States. It was just, the land. We didn't recognize the border, to Mexico. It was just land. And we all traded things back and forth amongst each other. There was this great trading route that was, in place. And there were certain people that did that trading, and those certain people had their own language, even the trader language, so that they could communicate with each other as they went from one part of the country to the next, whether it was Florida or somewhere up around Ottawa, or California to Mexico City. So we people find that amazing. They have no idea that it was that sophisticated, and it was that sophisticated. And we got things from their shells, different shells, and they will find remnants of those things at different places they shouldn't be. And that's because we were using the assets that were available. And we trade a wampum was our money. It's a beautiful prehistoric shell that mostly came from the east coast the of North America. So it's amazing when you start thinking of it in that concept. And as far as Nancy Ward's gravesite, it's the most beautiful, serene place. And it is under the care of the state of Tennessee, the great state of Tennessee. And they maintain the grounds there, and they call me on occasion, and I've been able to advise and speak with them about what, as a family, we would like to see done there. The descendants of Nancy Ward all pulled together, and we bought granite stones, benches that were placed along the way up the hill so people could stop and rest on their way up, because it's a pretty decent sized hill. And to honor her, I placed a black granite tier stone at the entrance, and it's all over the internet now. It's just amazing, saying that this is the final resting place for Nancy Ward, for her son Five Killer, and also for her brother Longfellow. And those names all ring through history as well. And that was her son and her brother. And when her son died many years later, he was buried there. Nancy was buried elsewhere. And actually, Longfellow outlived Nancy and Five Killer. So he was placed on the hill as well. Nancy was buried elsewhere and moved, I believe, twice, and stored somewhere for a while. And then in the early 1900s was placed with her brother and son on top of the hill by the DAR, which is the Daughters of the American Revolution. And that is now the Nancy Ward chapter that did that. And in October, I will be the opening speaker for another award plaque that has been proffered for Nancy and for the American Revolution, and the important and vital role that all three of those people played there. So I'm very honored to be a part of such a beautiful day that it's going to be. And we'll see. I just keep hoping that someday, somewhere, somebody that's got some influence is going to hear this story, and they're going to go, yep, this is the movie we need to make. We need to quit remaking Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Family.
Right?
Yeah.
Let's get some really good stories out there.
Get some, good old, true stuff going on here. Yes, does some of it going to have to be expounded on because we don't actually know? Yeah, but I guarantee you, between Miss Hobbs and myself, we are going to know a lot of the answers to those things, whether we know or we just know. And I just have to believe that that's the reason that we're both doing these projects, is someday somebody important is going to go, yep, these ladies are right. She deserves to be told about, that she was overlooked in our history, and that it's her turn, and that she needs to be marked in history as the great leader and the important role that she played in our being able to break away from England.
So do you know if she's being taught in the schools for American history?
A little bit, not a lot. She's got a paragraph with Dragging Canoe, because Dragging Canoe was a little stinker, and he was quite the warrior, so to speak. And his part to play was, he was mad. He was mad. His father was the peace chief, the chief that kept peace. Or was that the war chief? Anyways, one or the other. And he became, aggravated at what was going on, at the, we were losing our lands. We were giving them up left and right. They were being taken left and right. And he wasn't about it. He wasn't happy about it. So he branched off and became a Chickamauga, Cherokee, and opened up Ducktown and a lot of the other lower cities in the state of Tennessee that actually reaches down into northern Georgia as well. And, he put up a good fight. He did. He put up a good fight. And like I said earlier, Five Killer, worked with him. So, you had Oconestoga and Nancy and Attakulla, playing their part in everything. And there was one point, I just can't remember the name of the area that it was called. It was somewhere up around Knoxville. There was a meeting of the chiefs of the Cherokee, because each area had their own chief, so to speak. And they had gathered in one place to speak with the future Americans, and they were actually held hostage there. Thomas Jefferson was able to negotiate the release of, with the help of Attakulla. He was loose, so to speak, and Nancy Ward and Oconestoga, the war chief of our particular area, Chota, were being held prisoner there. Almost as soon as Nancy and Nanyehi and Oconestoga were released, they executed those 13 chiefs. So there was so many things at play and at work there. You have to believe it's a God thing. It's a creator thing that their lives were spared, and they went on to do many many things, and from that point on, so it just goes on and on and on and on and on. So
Yeah.
worth a
So, Deborah, I want to ask you. Nancy did the treaties with George Washington and Daniel Boone and all of those people, right? The treaties. Did she speak English? Is that how she was able to make these treaties?
yes, yes. Oconostoa and Attaculla, as well as several other sons of Matoy or Mortoy, whichever you want to call him, Matoy, who was the who King George II deemed the Emperor of America, and they went on a ship called the Fox to England and stayed for like 3 months. In that time, a lady named Lucy Ward was a lady in waiting to the Queen, fell in love with my uncle Oconostoa, and ended up coming to the Americas later to be his wife. And at one point, well, Nancy's father was killed in a battle, and it's believed that his name was also Five Killer. And when your father dies, your uncles become your parent.
Oh,
So these two great leaders became as a father to Nancy and her brother Longfellow. And in that process, um, Tame Doe, whoever you want to, Catherine Kingfisher, there's a lot of controversy there. I'm not going to get into that, but history will call her Tame Doe because she could tame the deers. And that is true. She did. We have a link with animals that defies a lot of things that people understand. And she offered her child to Oconostoa and Lucy because Lucy had just lost a child of her own. In that process, Lucy said, "No, she's your daughter. I can't take your child." But she did become like another mother to her as well because of
yeah.
the heritage, the way things line up there. So that's how English was really, really, really.
Oh, I think we got a black screen. Oh, there you go. You're back.
I don't know what happened there.
I don't know. You went
No.
all black.
um,
Break time.
I'm telling you, it's my luck. Anyways, yeah, I have interesting times with electronics. Trust me, me and electronics don't really get along all that
Yeah,
well.
me neither. Like we were saying before the show started, I was like, there's days it tests me. I'm just like, you're not winning today.
Mm-hmm. No, but anyways, it like I said, I think it's a great story. It was one Ilya Kazan, who was a famous American director back in the 50s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. He just couldn't find a script to honor her in that way. One of the shows on Daniel Boone did touch on the Nancy Ward thing and the negotiation and the sale. He worked for the Transylvania Company, and that's who bought Kentucky. And they were the people that negotiated that treaty.
So, after finding out all of this incredible stuff about your great grandmother, can you speak Cherokee?
Wado, Ushti, and that's about it. No, I can't do it. I have listened to Cherokee tapes for hours and hours and hours. Darling, I can barely speak English. Nope, can't do it.
See, and that's something too that is lost, right? If we don't keep practicing it, is the language, you know. And it's hard to learn when you don't know about it, especially like you were told by your mom, like you're Cherokee, but don't mention it, don't, you know. So you couldn't even go out and say, you know what, at the age of 12 and say, Mom, can I learn the language because you were told not to
Well,
speak of it, right?
as we know, one of the sad parts of American history, and notably the Cherokee, were that they tried to destroy our language. They didn't want us to speak our language. We could be punished, beaten for speaking our language. Our babies were taken from our homes and put into schools, which is probably one of the saddest parts, next to the Trail of Tears, one of the saddest things that happened to natives across the United States was them trying to murder our languages so that we would forget.
And that's a story that needs to get out there as well, right?
And it's quite sad. It is quite sad. But we're a tough people. We're a tough people. We're a conquered people, but we're tough. We're still here. The Cherokee Nation is the largest Native American nation that there is. And I am in the process of doing the paperwork to become an actual member of the nation. That's like I told my friend, I said, I don't need a piece of paper to tell me who I am, but I
Exactly.
do want to honor my grandmother and and become a part of the Cherokee Nation.
Well, it's sad how history is because of paper and pen, right? You know,
Yes, well, it's
we
been
can't just
difficult.
go out and say, you know what, this is my heritage, this is who I am. We need that paper to prove who we are. And that's sad, you know. Uh,
Yes, in that
there's so
realm,
many
yes.
people out there that have like you said, murdered the language. Let's keep it real. They have stolen these languages and they tried to make them invisible, like they never existed, but they did. And for anybody who's listening now or watch the replay, if you know somebody who would like to turn this into a movie, like I would be honored if you would take this tea time and pick in pieces and reach out to Deborah, because I think these are stories that we need to get out there. And we need to have these stories so that in 20 years, somebody can watch this film, they can watch this movie, they can hear this story, they can read Deborah's book. Deborah has all of the proof. She's part of a lot of incredible things. And Deborah, I really want to thank you for bringing the history to the table because we need to start talking real stuff, real life stories.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
and when I did the research on your great grandmother, I was amazed. Like this woman was an amazing woman, you know,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
her story needs to be told and it needs to be
Worth
heard. You know,
worth telling.
we need American history. We need the truth stories. We need the real
Yeah.
stories.
Yes. Well, this was somebody said, well, there's no proof in history that your grandmother knew George Washington. Said, well, she did write him letters. So that's something. I said, but you can't disprove it either. And I said, these are stories that have circulated through my family for hundreds of years now. And I believe my family. Just saying. It especially back then and in these 200 years, it wouldn't have served my grandmother very well knowing these fellows. It really wouldn't. So, that we continued to tell that part of our story in the oral tradition and not write it down should be of no surprise at all, really, to anybody, no matter what historian you are and where your, research leads you. The letter that she wrote to George Washington was found in a desk that belonged to Thomas Jefferson. There is a Native American woman that visited Thomas Jefferson's house that they don't know who was.
Well, she had so many names, right?
She sure did. She sure did.
So, we had so many. When we were talking about this in the back before we even went live, the secrets that our families held so
Yeah.
they wouldn't be known. Secrets eventually come out. And the stories come out,
Yes, they do.
whether you have many names, they come out, and I love the name of that book,
Thank you
Woman of
so
Many
much.
Names, because it really intrigues somebody. What kind of name did she have? How many names did she have?
Like
You ask
13.
these questions and then you're like, okay, if I grab the book and I read the book, then I can see, oh, she had this name, that name.
And there's grandma right there. that was taken, it was drawn by my girlfriend, Dawn Fisher. And I gave her, several pictures of myself. And my grandpa always said, "Oh, you look like my mother." My mother looked like Nancy Ward. Everybody said she looked like Nancy Ward because she was born in 1870s. So there was still people alive that actually were little when he died, and they would say, "Oh, you look just like Nancy Ward," and then my grandpa would say, "Oh, you remind me of my grandmother," and then I go to the gravesite and there's this etching, and there's a lot of controversy surrounding that as well. But one of the Hildebrand children, which was one of the great grandchildren's, in the mid 1800s, sat down with an artist and gave a description of him, Nancy Ward, and that was the pencil drawing that's at the gravesite, and that was placed there by the state of Tennessee. So I can't imagine the state of Tennessee just made some historic,
Right.
fiction up and stuck there. So, and Sharon Iara did a beautiful portrait of her. And if you pull out my senior pictures and put them next to each other, it's crazy the similarities between her and I and several of my cousins. I mean, the strand of DNA, it runs deep, and we got all kinds of, there's so many of us that have the same characteristics 200 years later. So she had some strong DNA, don't you know?
Well, and that's what I'm getting from you sitting here. You're a strong woman, Deborah, because like you were in construction, landscaping, you were in the dirt, like you were in the, you know, in the heavy stuff, and you were doing that woman's right. You were burning your bras, you were getting out there and saying, "Hey, look at me. I'm a woman, but I can do it. Let me try." And I think we need more women like that in today's history. Because Deborah, your story is going to be history as well, because you're sharing this story today of your great grandmother.
Thank
and
you.
and there are people out there that are saying, you know what, let me share my story of my great grandmother. You're encouraging people, you're inspiring people to get involved in the past. You just
Yes.
never know what you're going to find out when you start digging in the past.
If
And
we
it's not
don't
living in the past, it's actually respecting the past.
understand your past to know your future and to what you might be able to do for the future. We've all got a part to play in this, to some degree. It doesn't matter how big of a part it is. It can be this big. It can be the strand of a hair. You're still part of history.
Yep.
And part of your family. And, the family has to survive. Or what do we have? And the family needs to think about coming back together and reuniting and giving up the things of this recent past that have split families just flat into. And we need to find our way back to each other. That is the most special gift we can give our grandchildren, because guess what, we're teaching our babies bad things.
Yes.
Bad things, because if you can do it to your mother, your brother, your sister, you are showing your children that it can happen to them too, and that they can turn their backs on their parents too, because of what they're learning through these last 3 or 4 years of our world history that is not good.
Yep.
Our families need to work hard to get back to each other, forgive each other for being allowed to make a decision, because
Right.
everyone should be allowed to make their own decisions in this life, and act accordingly, and not be shamed or ridiculed or anything else for that thought process, because we're the ones that got to live with it.
Yep.
But we didn't make them thinking, "Oh, I'm going to lose half my family because I won't take a shot."
Yep.
Are you kidding me? You tell me you're kidding me. No, not kidding.
Yeah. Well, and I think the storytellers are the ones that are going to be the new history makers. We really need to keep telling stories. Our ancestors, that's what they used to do at the dinner table, tell a story of the grandma or the grandpa before. or how they came to a certain country. We need to start keeping these stories alive. We really need to start sharing stories. We're running almost at the end of the hour, so I want to get in really quick. I love this conversation, and I love history. If anybody knows Miss Liz loves history, and it's not me living in the past, it's me respecting the past and understanding who I am as an individual, just like Debra did with her grandma. But I want to get in before we wrap up. Debra, I'm going to ask you, what is your T? So what 3 words are you going to give me?
History, heritage, home.
And I love that you did that. Now tell me why you did those 3 words.
History is important to everybody. Our heritage is who we are, and home is where we belong.
I love it.
This is my home. This country is my home. I love my country. I love my family. And I am so happy about my heritage.
I love it. It's the simple things. And that's what it is with T, right? We don't have to do the TEA. We can do 3 words. 3 strong words is our story. It only takes 3 words to tell your story. And that's what Debra did in 3 words. We serve so the word I'm looking for, Grandma help me here. We serve what society tells us because we're scared of serving our true teas. And this is what Tea Time is about. I want people to start sharing their real teas, start sharing your stories, be those storytellers, be those history makers, and be the one that's going to be judged. Be that different tea out there that is not scared to say, you know what, this was my grandma, and I'm proud of my grandma, and I want you to hear my grandma's story. It's that simple. This is what tea time is. It's not a beverage. You can drink your tea, you can drink your coffee, you can have a glass of wine. That's not what Miss Liz is about. Miss Liz is to bring your story to the table, to be heard, to be seen. And Debra, I really want to thank you for sharing your tea this morning. It might be afternoon somewhere else. It's 5:00 somewhere, right? Everybody's having But I really want to thank you, Debra, for coming and being open and sharing your story about your great grandmother, because
thanks for having me.
Your grandma is a story that needs to be told.
It is. Thank you.
And I want to thank you, Debra, for coming and sitting and serving a strong tea with me. And I want to thank Bruce for sending you to me. Check out Miss Liz's webpage. You're going to see the collaborations that Miss Liz is making. Bruce is on there. You can see on the collaborations and supporters, and check out his client list and who he has that he's working with, because he has some really incredible people. Check out the website for the black and white collection that is out there. The black and white collection is about balance. We need black, we need white, we need balance in life. It is not racist. It's not color related. It is about the balance of life. So check out the black and white collection. You can get some pencil cases here for kids that are going back to school. Miss Liz has the black and white here, so you'll see the logo. And then if you want a book and you want a storytelling of abuse, grief, and mental health, check out those 3 books back there. So check that out on the website as well, and check those out. We really got to start telling our stories. And today we're storytelling. So I will be back at 3 p.m. with my second guest, and at 7 p.m. with my third guest. Thursday, we do 3 shows. So at 3 p.m., we have Brenda Susie coming in, and she'll be talking about soul life adventures. And she's a strong woman. You'll want to check her out as well. And at 7 p.m., then we have Leslie James, who will be coming in about end of life, the transition, and the moving forward. So I feel that my 3 guests again this week are all aligned with the past, the journey, the adventures of life, the ending of life. But the end of life is not the end. It's just the beginning. And that's why we make a full circle, because we start with Debra, then we go to Brenda, then we go to Leslie, and they all make a full circle. And this is what we do, is we serve strong tea at Tea Time with Miss Liz. So Debra, if anybody would like to get your book or reach out to you, how can they connect with you?
Well, pretty much you can order it Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Books A Million. You can go straight to the website Woman of Many Names, and that'll link you straight to the publisher. It's out there.
Awesome. And I really want to thank you again, Deborah. I had a blast, and I love talking about grandmas because my best friend is my grandma. She's 97 and she's just my best friend. Let's keep the stories alive. Let's really stay connected to family. Let's go on Ancestor. You just never know what you might find out.
It's amazing.
There's heritage too. There's a lot of different ones. And if you want to know a little bit more, you can go back to season 1 and you can meet with Jenna Hennison, and she was on Tea Time in season 1 and she talked about DNA. So let's just keep the circle moving. Let's just keep it going, and let's see everybody at 3 p.m. with another strong cup of tea with Miss Liz.